drive down the right field line. That ball is gone! LSU wins the college.
The throw to the plate will be late. The Mariners are going to play for the American League Championship. I don't believe it. It just continues. My oh my.
High fly ball into right field. She is gone.
Oh, drives one. Right field. Did he do it? He did. Are you kidding me? Let's go.
You know, I'm having a tough time coming up with new ways to yawn, essentially, at the Major League Baseball offseason, people. We need new ways to describe the lack of energy and activity. It's been a pretty strange offseason, if you ask me, but it's baseball nonetheless. We're back with another episode of the FSS Plus podcast, and for the first time, by the way, we have the entire FSS crew here. Joining me simultaneously is FSS Plus senior analyst Joe Doyle and Jeremy Booth, former MLB scout, president of baseball operations for the New Balance Future Star Series. It's good to get all three of us here. We talk together, quite a bit off the air, but this is the first time we're doing it like this on the show. Gentlemen, by the way, first of all, I'm not sure there's enough room on this show for the three voices that we have here, but we're going to absolutely do the best we can. Gentlemen, before we get going today, I'm curious, give me a short response to the following question. Since the end of the 2023 Major League Baseball season, when the Rangers defeated the Diamondbacks 5-0 to win the World Series, what has changed the most in Major League Baseball? For example, I might say the weather. No, seriously. I might say, hey, the level of competition in the National League Central, judging by what has taken place to date. Joe, let's start with you. What's changed the most to date here as we're in early January now since the end of the World Series?
I think it's going to be a little bit of a cop-out answer because I don't think it's what's changed on the field, but I think for the product as a whole, I think the public perception of Major League Baseball has changed the most. I personally can't remember a winter where the shift from fans has gone so far from this is a great sport, this is a great game, I'm rooting for my team no matter what, everything is an upswing, everything is peachy hunky-dory, to wow, 80% of this league really is real estate tycoons. And this isn't me getting on a soapbox. I really do feel that way. I'm not complaining about one fan base, one organization, one front office, one ownership group. I think in general, fans have become more aware and have begun to catch on that this really is a business. It really is all about making money. And for me, I just think that's what's changed the most for the sport over the last 3 months.
JB, how about you? You're down there in Houston. You see the Astros win. You see Texas win. They're bigger markets. We haven't seen the Yankees win much lately. We haven't seen the Mets do much. Boston won a few years back. The Dodgers have won fairly recently. Thinking along the same lines there in terms of what has changed the most, or you got something completely different for us?
Well, the Mets did a lot. They just did a lot of spending. They didn't do anything else. They did a lot of spending like last year. And so there's nothing they can do this year because they're trying to shed all that. That's the best thing the Mets have done in 5 years is spent. Okay. When it comes to the league as a whole, to me, everything's really just been status quo, which kind of ties into what Joe's been talking about, real estate tycoons and, pocketing dollars. But for me, the biggest thing that's changed in baseball, and this is disappointing, are the rules. We had some rule changes. We have the baseline. We have the pitch clock that's gone down a little bit. And, it's another adjustment to the game. But that's the biggest action we've got. Ohtani, to talk about him, I'm sorry, Shohei Ohtani, to talk about
that's gone, man.
Was in, look, it's a big market guy. There were 4 or 5 teams that could compete, right? That's it. And the ones that maybe could have made an offer that he might have considered didn't even have any interest. So there wasn't that. And then when it comes to Yamamoto, he comes out and says, I was going to LA anyway. Didn't matter. So outside of that, we got the Astros picking up a guy, as my co-host down here in Houston, Jason Bristol, said, off the scrap heap. You got waiver claims. You have very limited movement. Sale gets traded. But that's about it, man. There isn't anything going on. So if nothing's going on, nothing's changed. Right. So when Joe's talking about the real estate stuff, yeah, he's right. Real estate tycoons. Yeah, these guys I get it. That's how fans are going to feel. And for me, Major League Baseball made some action changes again. A couple that were overdue. One that's a little bit suspicious in my mind. We'll see how it plays out. I get why they did it, and maybe too soon is a better word than suspicious, but they did it, and we'll go from there. That's it. That's been a very stagnant and very stale offseason as we find ourselves 5 weeks from spring training.
Yeah, I think Joe, I thought the way you were going to go, and you're kind of saying this, but the gap between the elite 5-6 teams in Major League Baseball and the bottom 5-6 teams in terms of spending is greater than it's ever been. You can do the math. You can check me on that. If you're out there, check me on that. I did the math. I use COTS, I use Spot Trek, I use USA Today Baseball, I use Baseball Reference. It has never been greater in percentage than it is today. Those elite 5, 6, 7 teams versus the bottom of the league. And that's where I thought you were going, Joe. The interesting thing to me isn't where these players have landed. I think it's the money. I gotta be honest with you, I think it's the money. That's been the most surprising thing. But interesting. Yeah, the rules changes. We keep going down that road. At some point this year, Jeremy, we're going to have to get to, you called it suspicious / too soon. We're going to have to dive into that. I don't want to do it today, but I want to dive into that at some point because there's one of those rule changes you don't really love at this particular point. I want to dive in that at some point. I made a note about it, and we'll do that. All right, a couple things I want to address today before the buzzer sounds. Scouting hangups. And if you're out there and you're like, I don't even know what that means, well, we'll explain it in a few. Also, I want to get to our favorite comps on a draft player, whether it was your comp, someone else's comp, you read it, you saw it on social media, another scout, a team, a GM, someone on a network somewhere. I don't care. It doesn't matter. That's either the funniest or the most wrong or the most dead on or the most interesting. I'm curious to what those are. I get a lot of questions. What's the biggest miss? You talk to scouting directors. What's their biggest miss? What's JB's biggest miss? What's Joe's biggest miss? I think that's an interesting question, but let's do that with draft comps at this point. It doesn't have to be yours. I'm just looking for something interesting at this point. And if we have time, I want to dive into the idea of the additional wild card maybe being a problem in Major League Baseball. Maybe it's contributing to that lack of activity because we're talking about free agency a lot, but the trade market has barely budged other than the Chris Sale type deals, the Mariners trying to cut payroll, things of that nature. We haven't seen the big deal. If we have some time, we'll get to that as well. Before we get going, you got to go to futurestarsseries.com Friday. So if you're listening to this on Friday, now go there now. Joe's FSS Plus preseason. Let's see JB's response on this.
I can't wait to see his face.
College baseball All-America teams. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I got to look at it. I got to say, Joe, you did a really good job on it. But it's a pretty strong group of players, especially when you think you went 3 teams deep on this. If you're curious who's who in college baseball, check that out on Friday and over the weekend. Gents, let's actually start at the bottom of that just to get it out of the way. We'll start at the big league level. The extra wild card gave us 350 playoff teams every year. But maybe when you look back at the deadline last year and you look at this winter, maybe not last winter, but I think even last winter, but if you look at the last couple of transaction cycles, which is the winter and the trade deadline, there hasn't been a lot of that traditional one team trades young prospects, the other team trades proven veterans kind of move. And I think that extra wild card is at least part of the reason that's happening right now, and part of the reason why this winter has been so dead. I'm interested to get your take on that. Do you like the extra wild card? Do you see negatives in it with so many teams getting into the postseason? We know that there are positive. Let's start with you, JB.
The extra wild card to me, the positive is that it keeps more fan bases engaged longer. Right, that's a revenue deal. It's more teams in the play. All things that go with it. NBA model, NFL model, same thing. It's spread a little bit. The negative is, in my mind, it reduces the incentive to put your club over the top. It rewards and I apologize to both of you in advance for what I'm about to say. It rewards the 54% mentality. Right, and if that's the mentality that it rewards, then it doesn't help you push to win. Being mediocre and just okay is good enough. And anytime you're in sports and being just good enough is what you're shooting for, you're probably doing the wrong thing, right? You need to shoot to win, and nowhere has experienced that more Actually, and this is probably a very factual, real statement at this point, than the area of Seattle, because there's really never been a winner, right? I mean, there's been some playoff teams, never been a winner, and it seems like every time you get close, the eject handle gets pulled, and doesn't matter who the owner is, just it does, and it goes the other way, and it becomes something that mediocre is good enough to keep the fans engaged, but we're not really going to win. If we get in and do a little bit, great. And that happened. That was last year, right? They got in. It was last year. Yeah,
22. Yep, after the 22.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not the extra wild card. I get where they're doing it from a revenue model. It's a revenue. I get it, but from a competitiveness standpoint, it removes the incentive to make the big moves and spend the money, because just good enough gets you in now, right?
The whole system, though, JB, rewards mediocrity, because even if you told me like a Pittsburgh Pirates or a Cincinnati Reds or Milwaukee Brewers, whoever it is, just win 81-81 or 74-88 or 76-86 or even 68-94 pretty much every freaking year, the owners of that franchise are going to make money. Even if they're going to get revenue sharing, those are organizations that are going to get revenue sharing, so they're going to come up in the black, right? Every year because of revenue, because of teams like the Mets and the Red Sox and the Dodgers and clubs like that, the elites are going to support the rest of the league. And when they go to sell that franchise, they're going to make millions, if not billions. I mean, I'm closest to Seattle, so I'll use them as an example. That current group, First Avenue Entertainment, officially bought that club for about $1.1 million in August of 2016. The Forbes number on that franchise right now, the franchise value estimate, is more than twice that. It's about $2.4 billion now. They could turn around and sell and make over $1 billion, $1.3 billion today, plus all the money they're pocketing. And again, I'm not trying to pick on Seattle. That's the way the system works these days. I don't know what you do about that.
Look, I don't want to get into how I know this, because I want to keep the information of where I got it from, private, but certainly, there's only a few clubs that run at a profit. Okay, the Astros run at a profit
without the revenue sharing. You mean?
Yes, the Astros run at a profit. Okay, the Mariners don't know, maybe, but I do know the Astros run at a profit, and you can tell that Jim Crane, from a business standpoint, is very interested in running at a profit, because he's not getting anywhere near or going over that luxury tax. It's just not happening, right? When it comes to the Mariners and other clubs, I think people get upset, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, having been in those rooms and having had the conversations you guys are aware that we've had, and some we've talked about on air, when you don't pour the dollars into the team to win, right? Nobody cares if you're making money. Making money is part of business. Nobody wants to lose money, right? And I can tell you as a business owner that having what's yours not show up is a very uncomfortable and not fun feeling, right? What I can also tell you, though, is that I try to pour things here into the people that are here to get to the bigger finish line. And so if you're an owner of a big league club, that's what you really should be doing. At least that's the concept of trying to win. Now, this wave of owners, some embrace that. The guy in Philly, John Middleton, right? He embraces that. The Steinbrenners before, they embrace that. They're starting to get back to that now. Have they had some really odd, let's say, investments that haven't worked out? Sure. But they've embraced that. The Dodgers, clearly, the Giants are trying. The Rangers do it. They have, no matter who the owner is. So there's clubs out there that do it, right? And then there's clubs that don't. But to do that and not invest money, then you better draft well. And if you don't draft well, I'll give you an example of a club that has drafted well for decades. It's the Minnesota Twins. Mm-hmm. They've drafted well for decades, and they're always showing up as being good, and they will go out and get a piece of it over the top. So if you're not going to go ahead and pour it into the big league club, you still got to put a winning product on the field. As long as you put a winning product on the field, nobody's watching your books. Nobody cares. Nobody's asking what's going on, but you got to win. And if you're not going to do that and you're just going to come up just short every year, you're going to upset some people, and rightfully so.
Joe, you like that extra wild card? Do you see other problems there we're not talking about yet?
I like the extra wild card, in a vacuum, but I think the issue is baseball has just changed so much. Like JB, you were saying it rewards the 54 percenters. I think it becomes harder and harder for a team to get to that point if they don't spend money to be an 88 to 90 win team. I look at it like this. Name another time in history when teams clutched their prospects like they have today. it hasn't been long, but over the last 5 years, there was a time when Gleyber Torres was the number 2 prospect in baseball, and he was traded for a reliever.
Mm-hmm.
Will Myers was the number 1 prospect in baseball. He was traded to the Rays in a package. Eloy Jimenez was traded. He was the number 2 prospect in baseball. Who was there was a number 1 prospect was traded in baseball a while back too. I'm trying to remember who that was, and I think it was the White Sox. The Chris Sale deal.
Was that Yohan Moncada?
Moncada and Kopech. So it's like the player that is required to pull back a top 10 prospect in the sport almost doesn't exist anymore. I mean, the Washington Nationals were able to acquire CJ Abrams and James Wood, who ended up moving into the top 10 for 2.5 years of a 22-year-old superstar outfielder in Juan Soto. That you won't see that trade hardly ever again in the sport. It just won't happen. So I think just in general, the game as a process has changed. Front offices have become more analytical. And because of that, it's really hard to, stay afloat by acquiring prospects and moving big league talent and staying in that 90 win threshold without moving money. So I guess that was kind of a roundabout way of saying I like the wild card, but when it comes to trade deadlines and winters and actually trading impact prospects and acquiring those types of players, I just don't see those trades happening anymore.
Are we just not rewarding the division champ enough? Is there anything else we can do there? I mean, some people don't like the fact that the division champ sits out for 4 days or whatever it ends up being, 5 days. I don't really have a problem with it, but
I don't care.
Is there a way to reward that team better, like allowing them to pick the team they play or anything along those lines?
I hated that. They did that in 2020, I think, and I hated it. I hated the fact that they got to choose who their opponent was, and all of a sudden the narrative turns into, oh, this team has a chip on their shoulder because they were selected as the weakest link in who this team is going to play in the playoffs. I think that's bullcrap. Like, baseball just in general is parity. That's what the sport is. There is no momentum. I mean, not really. You see it sometimes, but it's really only as good as the next day's starting pitcher. There are lineups that get hot, but I don't think that should be a part of it. Now, do we want to be rid of the bye week? Get rid of the wild card round and just go a different route with everything? I don't know. Like, I find the hypocrisy around playing 162 games, trying to win 120 of them, so you get that bye, you get that home field advantage, and then you cry unfair when you get knocked out because you're cold. Like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You got to have one or the other.
Yeah, that's interesting. They're going to continue to add playoff teams, though. I mean, when they expand to 32 teams, which is probably happening, we're probably going to hear some sort of announcement in the next couple of years about expansion to 32, which generally speaking, I'm okay with. But that's going to mean another playoff team because it's an easy way for owners to do that. So we're probably still going to be talking about this in 2 or 3 years. Good stuff, guys. Okay, let's talk about scouting. JB, I know you don't know anything about this, but we'll walk you through it a little bit.
Please do. It's my first day.
You can thank me later. It's fine. One thing that's interesting to me is, like, I hear and I see on social media a lot. And one of the examples in one corner of the baseball community, I'll say, so laugh on your own time, the inverted W. Remember all that talk? Now I don't really see that anymore. Maybe it's because I've blocked all those people that just like yell and scream about inverted W's. And by the way, why don't we call it an M? But something like that, like the idea is inverted W, he's destined to have Tommy John surgery. Real or not, that would qualify as a scouting hangup. For example, maybe it's swing mechanics, maybe it's a long swing, maybe it's a hitch, maybe it's choppy and segmented, whatever that is. Maybe it's, well, he's only a big leaguer if he sticks it short, and here's why I don't think he can stick it short. There are lots of different angles we can go about. I'm just wondering if there's one or two out there, and we'll start with you, JB, that you really believe in, or maybe one that just isn't part of the conversation for you. And maybe you're going to tell me none of that disqualifies a player from your radar and kind of takes them off your plate. And if that's the answer, are there red flags for you when you're talking about an amateur player at the high school or college level moving into the draft?
Well, that's a pretty good question, and it's actually it's one that I can tell you that one of the better things I was able to do as a scout was read players. I'm not talking about tools or tools are obvious, right? They're obvious. Now, where they project to, that takes some art. The role building, that takes some art. But reading a player is something I just innately could do. I don't know why that is. I will tell you this. Anytime a player says, I'm not ready, I got a question. Anytime. Doesn't matter what it is. I'm not ready. Okay? I got a question. Anytime a player says, I don't want to be seen, that's a humongous flag.
Wait a second. Are you telling me that you've heard players say this?
Well, what you hear is things like overexposed. Well, overexposed only happens if you're not very talented.
Sure.
Okay. So if you're not very talented, you got to hide. I get it. You got to pick and choose when you are. But if you're a good player, what are you hiding for? Well, you're hunting for a game all the time. You're playing constantly. And the comfort level that comes with players who always show up, who, they call it in the big leagues, we say post, right? Always post. Players that always show up, they can be there every day. When they're going to be around. It's an impact. They're going to contribute. They're going to hustle. Those guys are the ones that get paid and they make it. The ones that say, I'm listening to, and I'll say this too, this another way. Because what they're not saying is I'm afraid, but the answers are I'm afraid, right? I don't want to do this because I'm not ready. Or my pitching coach says, which you get all the time, my pitching coach says, right? Or this guy said, to me, that's like, you're off the list. Like, I may not go tell anybody else you're off the list unless, but in my head, you're like, I'm done, right? Because I'm not interested in players who are afraid of the ball or afraid of the ballpark. I'm not. I'll give you an example. We have this event coming up at Globe Life. I've got some kids who are not class of 24 that are begging to get into this thing, begging, and they're talented, and it's not for them just yet, but they're screaming to get into this thing because they want to prove themselves against the talent that's in that event. And then you got other kids or other players who are fighting their state associations, if you will, like literally fighting to get in there, right? Whether you play or not, man, I'm good. Like we're in. And then you have players who run a little. And I'm not just talking about that event. I'm talking about in general when I say that. They run, right? Why? I don't think I can do this. If you get an opportunity to compete, and it's in the timing that you should be in the timing to do it. And I'm talking about an early event or even end of summer event. I'm not talking about something in December or November when most people should be down. I'm talking about, bookending events, right? Because you see this at the end of the summer all the time. Oh, he's tired. For what? He's 17 years old. What is he tired for? I won't hear it. Okay, 17. I didn't know what tired meant at 17. I was going to the cage at midnight, hitting, I can't tell you where. Well, I guess I can in the age of NIL. I can do it now. Back then, I couldn't do it. But the age of NIL, UCLA, I was able to get into UCLA and a couple other schools at will to hit at midnight to the point where the cops knew, hey, the campus cops, hey, Jeremy, what's up, man? At midnight, okay? Because you're fighting to get better and you're looking for a game and you're hunting for a ballpark. Tired doesn't enter your mind. Building back and building up doesn't enter your mind.
So for you, this is a confidence and character kind of a thing. Like that's the big one for you.
Okay, we'll use an example. When the bell rang for Globe Life, I'm not singling anybody else out besides these couple of guys. Slade Caldwell and David Hogg said, can we use aluminum bats? It wasn't like, can we play? It wasn't like, we'll let you know. It was like, can we use aluminum? Because these are college guys and we're going into our season, right? The answer was, of course, we're going to be there. That indicator says we're going to go ahead and do this. When you are a player who doesn't have that enthusiasm for the opportunity, it tells me you're hiding something. Okay? And it doesn't matter who you are. I heard one player who's going to remain nameless said, I've done everything I need to do. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. No, you haven't, because the draft is 6 months away, buddy, okay? It hasn't. And you need to be in a position to always advance the good days and the bad days. As a scout, you learn more from the bad days than you do from the good days.
Right.
Because, so Vern Followell, who was a twin scout for a lot of years, used to say this to us as young scouts. And Mike Radcliffe used to say this too. He'd say, If a guy had a good day at the ballpark, so what? You know why? Because it doesn't get any easier. They're supposed to dominate. They're supposed to, if they're prospects, they're supposed to dominate in high school and they're supposed to dominate in college because it didn't get easier. It just doesn't. If a guy has a bad day, show me that. Show me what a guy can do when he's struggling, how a guy's going to compete. Show me how a guy's going to rebound. Show me his resiliency. That's how you learn. You don't learn from a guy that goes out and, as Sammy Hughes would say, who's now a cross-checker with the Giants, would say, melt 4 balls. Like, so what? It's great. It's a good swing, right? But you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to do it. So when you look at red flags, for me, the makeup is always going to be the separator. It's not going to be the 70 raw. It's not going to be the 60 arm. That's great. Put them in the bag, and that's nice. But the road to the big leagues is littered with guys that didn't make it that were 5-tool athletic studs. And the ones that show up are the guys like Adam Frazier, who your boy over here had in the second round. Okay? So why? Not because he was a dude, not because he was the slashiest guy in the field, because the kid could hit, he competed, he didn't take plays off, he could play short if he had to, probably end up at second, and he could use the whole field and control the strike zone.
Might be one of my favorite Jeremy Booth scouting reports, by the way.
What,
is the Adam Frazier scouting report. It's one of my favorite ones, and I have a stack of them that I dig through on a regular basis. Joe, I'm wondering along the lines of data. It's such a huge part of the game today. I'm curious if there are things we hear about a lot of stuff, spin rates.
I'm sorry, Jason. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
Whoever's listening to this, if you say I'm not ready, and there isn't really a good reason, if you say I've made it, and there isn't a good reason, I'm just counting the seconds till you fall. It's because you haven't made it. You haven't made it.
Hang on. Time out. I got to make a note.
You're still in amateur baseball. It doesn't matter what end of the spectrum. You're still in amateur baseball. And when you sign, you know what that is? It's another start. It's a starting point. It's not the big leagues. You know what the big leagues are? The big leagues are the big leagues. That's it. That's when it counts. That's when you can say I'm a big leaguer. It's when you become a big leaguer. Okay, I'm done.
You know, Jed Lowry said something on a radio show that I hosted in Seattle for a couple of years. The A's were in town, and we had Lowry on, and he said something that stuck with me for a long time. And I'd never heard it. Obviously makes perfect sense, but I never really heard, like, I don't know, at the time he was 28, 29 years old, been in the big leagues for 6 years, been with 2 or 3 teams, had some pretty good years. You know, he's another one of those guys, JB, that, you know, not a bunch of loud tools, but turned into a pretty good player, play multiple positions and hit and switch it and all that good stuff. Little bit of Adam. Yeah, had a good career, but he was 28. I want to say he was 28, 29 years old at that point. And something he said really stuck out, and it's popping up in my head right now as we're having this conversation. He said, look, if you get to the big leagues and you think you're done getting better, you're not done getting better. You're just done. You're just done. That's it. Like it's pretty much everyone too. Like there are a few exceptions, the Ken Griffey Juniors of the world, things like that. He was probably good enough to have a fairly long career, even if he didn't improve after his first couple of years. But if you get to 23, 24, 25 years old and you stop getting better, you're going to be out of the league in a heartbeat. And especially if you're someone like Lowry that doesn't have the 70 raw and the big tools or the big fastball. I thought that was really interesting, and I'll never, it's been 10 years, but I'll never forget him saying that. It just really stuck with me, and that's kind of part of my thought process now. Mr. Doyle, data. Data is a big deal in baseball, maybe too big a deal for some clubs and in some areas, but it's obviously a big deal. And I'm curious, kind of same question, but with metrics, with data. We hear about spin rates, we hear about fastball shape, we hear, and there are different ways to measure that. We hear all kinds of stuff like that. I'm curious if there's one or two that stand out to you that you kind of think we've kind of learned maybe over the years, this maybe isn't as big a deal as we thought it was, or maybe something that is a significantly bigger deal, at least right now as we see things, than we've given it credit for. Maybe it's something new that we didn't have 5 years ago. Well,
really quickly, on the Adam Frazier front, I talked to enough guys now, like Adam, everyone loves Adam Frazier. Everyone in the industry, every scout, every cross-checker, every director. It's Frazier, it's Seth Smith, it's Kyle Gibson, it's Whit Merrifield. It's like they're just beloved like across the league. So I'm glad that he was pulled. And then really quick, I wanted to add in my one thing just from I have hardly the amount of experience that really either of you have, but I have done 236 interviews now on YouTube with players that are draft eligible over the last 5 drafts. And the one that sticks out for me is, even as a 16 or a 17-year-old or a 20-year-old, I ask, what are you looking for in a future employer, future big league organization? If they ever say preferably somewhere warm, generally has been a red flag, and it generally has not gone well at the next level. It kind of is a loop around way of saying you're kind of soft. Like you'll play baseball, but it has to be under your circumstances, and
that's kind of what JB was
adversity.
saying. That's kind of an excuse. It's a don't overexpose me. Don't put me in the cold weather. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's part of that.
How many players would you said you've done like 200, 250 of those interviews?
I've had 3.
Okay.
I've had 3 say it, and 2 of them were 21, one of them was 22, and none of them have made it past high A yet. So, they're in cold weather locations, and maybe that's what's slowed them down. But
boy, that's something you can't get away from in the minors either. You cannot get away from that in the minors. The Midwest League.
Can you put those players in the chat? Can you put those in the chat there on the side?
I'll text them. I'll text them to you after this.
Yeah, we don't want to throw them.
They're not actually. No, they're not. They're not old alumni, but data. So let's do data here. I think there's only really one piece of data, for me at least, my holy grail, that I can't get over if it's bad, and that's chase rate. Because everything else, I think you can improve. With bat to ball, like pure bat to ball skills, I think reps can improve that. Look what Chase Davis did this past year. I mean, his contact rate went up 12 or 13% entering his draft eligible year.
That's a lot of money on it too.
Crazy. I made himself probably $2 million more. Power, of course, power is going to improve if you got a good frame and you got, the game. Like Jacob Wilson deserved to go number 6. He's a baller. So power, like exit velos, I think it's important in judging a guy, but I have not seen too many situations where a guy went from being a 28, 30, 32, 34% chase rate, terrible approach, swinging at bad pitches, against guys throwing 88 to 91 in college, or even worse, 86 to 88 in high school. And it's improved once he starts seeing 94 from, whippy Latin players that are giving different looks than you see stateside. So
we don't know he can't do it until he's had the opportunity to face it. So it's hard to hold it against him. You can say he hasn't done it yet, and how much that matters in your report, I guess it depends on the scout. But it's something you were kind of alluding to there, the hard hit rates and things like that. You know what I do? I completely ignore that. If the kid is like 20 years old, if this kid is in college, I don't care what that looks like. I really don't care what that looks like. If this kid is 2 years out of high school and he's Harry Ford playing in advanced A, I don't care what his hard hit rate is. I really don't. Because we're going off averages here. Is he just hitting the ball soft a little too often? He's got timing issues. This is not a strength thing. This is not a I don't know how to square the ball up thing. Watch him in batting practice. There's something else going on here. I completely ignore that. So if I'm just throwing my 2 cents in really quick, hard hit rates for guys that are like 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, unless they're really good, because you can go, wow, he's already doing this at 18, 19 years old in low A or rookie ball or in high school or whatever, then fine. But I find it really difficult to ding a kid who's 6 feet and 170 pounds at 18 years old, 19 years old, because he's not going to be in 3, 4, 5 years. He's going to be, he's going to be Jed Lowry in 5 years. You think that guy had a hard hit problem? I don't, so I think about the hard hit rate that way.
The issue is that Jed Lowry isn't celebrated or compensated in today's game. But, I think at the top of the draft, when we're talking 3 million plus, exit velo is going to go a long ways, because if you have present exit velo at 20 miles an hour or at 20 years old, well, chances are you're going to have, exit velo as a pro. That question won't need to be answered. But if you're a kid that is 6'3", 180, 6'3", 185, it drove me crazy with the Jacob Wilson thing last year. Mm. It's like, he's 6'4", he's 185 pounds. You watch him hit. I watched him play 2 games, 7 at bats, and then he got hurt in one of the games. The kid has tremendous stretch at the plate. He separates. He's going to add a ton of strength. He's got bloodlines. to say that kid was a stretched out version of Nick Madrigal is crazy. Anyone could have looked at Nick Madrigal 8 years ago, 7 years, 6 years ago and been like, okay, this kid's not going to hit for power. He slaps at the ball. That's not something that you're going to get over. Jacob Wilson exploded through the zone. So, the raw power thing as a teenager or as a 20-year-old, I don't get terribly hung up on. If you've got elite bat to ball skills and you've got an elite approach, chances are you're going to find ways to find success at the next level, and we'll find a place for you to play on the field. You can produce value. You can produce FWAR. You can produce dollar signs to your team without hitting the ball out of the ballpark. Adam Frazier is probably a bit of a unicorn outlier in the bat to ball department, but he's a perfect example of the type of guy that gets, I don't know what he got, 900,000, 850,000 in the second round. And he's going to play 14 years in the league, and he's going to produce several, roll 45 seasons for good teams. So yeah, to wind back on what the actual question was, if it's chase rate and it's alarming and it's up in that 30% range, I'll bring up a guy in this draft class. I don't mind. I've written about it. I don't mind saying it. I'm the lowest guy in the industry on Tommy White at LSU. I'm not terribly low on him because he does things people just simply can't do.
Still a first rounder for you, at least.
Still a first rounder. He still has the fastest hands I've seen in the last 2 drafts. It's really impressive, but he's got a 30% chase rate and he's already a first baseman. For me, that's a pinhole on how you're actually going to produce big value at the next level. Are you going to be a guy that hits 228, 230 and 30 to 32 homers? That's great, but that's not Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso's hitting 270.
That's Rhys Hoskins. Yeah.
I don't even know if it's Rhys Hoskins. Rhys Hoskins is putting up a 27% strikeout rate as a pro. This guy's putting up something like that in college, seeing much worse stuff. So to answer, I want to see Tommy White improve the chase rate, especially without Dylan Cruz in that lineup, without being protected, without having a guy on second base every single time you come to the plate. Let me see you polish it up a little bit and show that you can actually hit. And if you can, I'll throw you up into the top 10, show that you're a polished pro. And otherwise, I think he probably fits, for me at least, in the 17 to 25 range.
JB, as a scout, when you're out and you're seeing college kids in particular, how do you assess and quantify what Joe was just talking about from a traditional scouting? You'll have the data. Your organization will have the data, that number, that chase number. But one thing I argue at the big league level with a lot of these guys, sometimes we stare at things like, oh, he chases 33%. So what? Like Julio Rodriguez was on a mad chase rate run last July and August. It also happened to be he was the best player in baseball those 2 months. So I don't buy the numbers by themselves. I'm just wondering, when you're scouting a player 20, 21 years old for the upcoming draft, how do you quantify something like, well, he chases. He doesn't swing at strikes. He doesn't swing at strikes. He doesn't hit strikes hard. How do you do that? How do you write that up? How do you quantify that? Because you're probably only seeing him like a couple of games early, and then maybe another couple times later.
It depends on the compilation of looks, right? So if, let's just use the 3 of us on this podcast, if you go in and see a player, and then Joe go in and see a player, and then I go in and see a player, it's all of it together, right? I mean, that's how you're supposed to do it.
And that should be the order we deploy it, by the way. Just saying.
If you're, for me, college kids, this is going to upset some people, but hey, why not? We'll just do that for the first time ever. If you're a college kid, I'm just not as excited about you because you're closer to being a finished product, right? So you need to have some upside for me. There needs to be some things that I can grow with and evolve with. Now, if you're a college bat that's just dominating everything, you're going to go at the top of the draft anyway, right?
Dylan Cruz.
Yeah, Cruz or Ryan Braun comes to mind, or Buster Posey, guys like that. They're just automatic. Let's go, and those type of guys you take, you go like this. This is a Tom McNamara move, and you don't look back, right? But for college guys, for me, the first thing I'm looking for is what's tomorrow got. Because they're already so much closer to what they're going to be. They've had 3 more years in many cases of development and growth and maturity. And at 21, it's a much safer understanding of what they're going to be at 25, which is why guys draft them, right? Now, with that said, things like chase rate concern me if they're not making contact. Okay? If they're swinging out of the zone and not making contact. When I look at contact rates, hard hit rates, and things like chase, I'm looking to see what they're doing against who and what the contact looks like. If a guy's just swinging and missing, I don't care if it's outside. That's a problem. If he's swinging and missing in the strike zone, that's a bigger problem because big league hitters don't do that. They don't.
JB, would you call that a red flag?
Can I add something on that really quick, JB? I think that's a really important distinction because that was one of the knocks on Jacob Wilson and Brooks Lee as well the year before. Both of those guys had not red flag chase rates, but 21 to 23%, playing at Cal Poly, playing at Grand Canyon, that's high. But both of them had outlandish unicorn, like I'm talking like 77% contact on pitches outside of the strike zone. So it's like, yeah, he's a little over anxious at the plate, and that might expose him at AA, but his hands are so good and his reactions and his triggers are so good that he fights. This is a guy he's going to chase, but he's also going to work a 9-pitch at bat, and maybe he gorks one into right field. So that's an important distinction.
Let's say this. If a guy's making contact outside the strike zone, all that means is that he's hunting. He doesn't want to walk. He wants to hit. Now, if he's swinging and missing in any point in time, I got issues. If he's getting himself into ambush counts and getting exposed with pitch sequencing, I got problems because it means the head's not in it, right? But chase rate as a whole isn't a big deal. It's your swing and miss rate. And so if you're swinging and missing inside or outside the strike zone, then there's major issues. If you're swinging, inside the strike zone, swinging and missing, you ain't playing. It's not happening. Forget it. Go do something else. I don't care if it's chess. I don't care if it's backgammon, shuffleboard.
You went to chess?
Yeah, it ain't this. Okay, now,
not golf.
Not even another sport.
Not even golf.
No,
you can play with little porcelain pieces and a cork board.
Golf is literally on a tee. And if you're swinging and missing in the strike zone, you might swing and miss and shank some golf things, right? So let's not get into that, okay?
We can't even ask the kid if he's got a great arm. Can you pitch out?
I don't want to hear tennis.
You want him out of baseball?
Well, this ain't Rick Ankiel, that's for sure.
No, yeah. So if you're swinging and missing outside, if you're swinging and missing outside the strike zone, but not in the strike zone, then it means your pitch selection's off. Maybe your vision isn't all the way there. Maybe there's something there you can correct, right? But to me, it's your swing and miss rate.
Yeah,
I think that at every level, it's hard to improve on that. Mm-hmm. So, it just really is. You can work backwards in many other things. Chase rate can improve a little bit. That's more of a mentality, provided your eyes are good. That's a mentality. But if you're swinging and missing and you're at an amateur level or an A-ball level or AA level, it's not going to automatically improve when you get to AAA in the big leagues. That's going to be what you do. And swinging and missing is going to be a concern.
You mentioned eyes there, and before we move on here, I wanted to ask because I got it from the horse's mouth. Jock Peterson was on the radar of a certain major league club during the draft.
I know the story.
Yeah, and I know you know the story. That's why I'm bringing it up. And he couldn't see. He couldn't see. Well, according to the club, he couldn't see, and we can't take him. How many times has that happened that you know of that you can think of, or something like that? Where there be really?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, in Rendon, it was his ankle.
Sure.
Right. With Jock Peterson, it was his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
There were other.
He's done all right. Like obviously they corrected that. He's done all right.
I don't know. Some of the reasons that medical at the time would give us to not take guys. You literally sit in the other side of the room because. The funny thing is in almost every draft room I was in, the medical staff sat closest to the screen where you put the video up and all the way across from the cross-checkers. Because the reason why
that sounds like a secure place to sit
it's a horseshoe
on the medical team.
It's a horseshoe table, right? And they'd sit on the farthest possible side away from the guys that were saying, we like this guy. Because they'd look up and go, yeah – got this. You got a funny toenail. I'm not sure. I don't know. The pinky was broken when he was 3. Don't know how it's going to heal. You do stuff like that, and you're just like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't. And so, you know, a couple times I've seen doctors or medical staff say some things, and guys literally got up and left the room because it was so ridiculous, but they were making such an issue out of it. You know, and then other times guys would go on and they play well. You know, and then we'd have guys that we would take that would pass these physical screenings and have nothing wrong with them, and they break anyway. You know, they break or they wouldn't get there. You know, a guy like Mark Pryor, who I was playing at the time, Pryor was great. Everything was great with Mark Pryor. How'd that work out? Right. And a guy like that Seattle took in Holtzen. Holtzen got some funky stuff, man. Delivery.
I know I've asked you this before on my show, but
it was ugly.
How does a club miss the whole crossbody pitching against his body thing? Like, how does a club miss that? Because that's not a nothing, right? If you're unfamiliar with Danny Holtzen, he was the number 2 overall pick in 2011. It was after Garrett Cole. Okay, he was really good in college. Really a good athlete. He even hit at UVA. Could do a lot of things, and he is a great kid. I always enjoyed talking to him once he got to AAA. He was great, very insightful, but he had some problem. He got hurt. He couldn't throw strikes, and he got hurt. And so, how do you not see the crossbody action there and say this could be a problem? Not that it's automatic, but this could be a problem health wise, and this could be a problem in terms of throwing strikes. Because they took that guy. Well, in college, he did.
Right. So the strikes thing at the time of the body and the time of the delivery, he's 97, 98. It's a plus breaking ball. You know, you're thinking, look, this doesn't come along, you know, every year, right? And the thing about picking in the first round at the top of the draft, as Jack used to say, is that you get the best of something. Best of something. So with Holton, it was the best left-handed arm in the draft, right? That was, without question, that's what you got. But see, Bernie didn't like the pick either. Right?
Right.
See that?
I'm with you, Bern. Yep.
Yeah. But see, yeah, hey, it's okay. The Mariners got through just fine, buddy. It's all right.
Well, that's the thing. They didn't, because Lindor should have been the pick, right, Bern?
Yeah, I don't know if they got through okay.
Yeah, we got through it. All right. Anyway, but you got to a place where you got a 97 mile an hour arm. You got an athlete. He was a pretty good athlete. I mean, you got a plus breaking ball. The fallback role on him is a closer. That's the fallback. You're not taking a guy at 2 because you think that's what it is, but you think you're getting something, right? And then Danny broke, and he broke a lot, and it never worked. He, you know, for me, the crossfire, the execution, you know, the strikes in college, overcoming the delivery. That's what was said. You know, he's overcomes the delivery, strikes in college, and plenty, you know, fills up the zone, and never going to be a command guy. But man, I used to call him a zone filler. These guys are zone fillers because it's in the middle. It's got some run. It's got some life. It might elevate, but man, it's going to be in the box, right? You're not going to go ahead and paint with this guy. So if you're looking at that, I still say that. You look at that stuff, and you're thinking, I'm getting the best of something. Now, behind that, where it gets tough, is the guys behind her: Lindor, Baez, Springer, Bauer, you know, the late Jose Fernandez, right? I mean, you know, even the guy that we took I was still in Milwaukee at the time, Youngman. You got Tyler Beatty later in the draft. You got a bunch of guys, Stroman. You got a bunch of guys. Just start going down the list of guys that went off the board that were something, right? That were just something. Nimmo went 13 that year, right? I mean, 2011, if you look back on it as a whole, Bundy went 4. Like, if you go back at 2011.
Starling,
draft,
that was the Bubba Starling draft, too. Yeah, Starling and Bundy. Yep.
And the debate in our room, believe it or not, was Rendon and Bubba Starling. Actually, it's another – we'll talk about that for another time. But the point is you go back at that draft, you look at all the guys that hit in 2011, and you end up with that. And it's not because Danny didn't deserve stuff-wise to be in that slot. And looking back on it, I'm not sure the Mariners don't take him again, all things being equal. What I can say is I've looked at the draft as it only matters what happens in the end. And in the end, the guy's got to show up in the big leagues. I understand why Mac did it. I don't fault him for taking it. I think Holton's an easy kid to fall in love with, if you will, at the time. He was an easy kid to like and want to be around. And you got to, 97 – in 2011, 97 was much more rare than it is today. People throw 95.
Especially from the lefty. People throw 95,
so you're like, yeah. What else? And But back, even 10, 12 years ago, 96, 97, one running around all the time. Not with the guy that strikes at a plus breaking ball at Virginia, which is a pretty good place to do it, right? Because you're at the ACC. So, it's not, it wasn't a bad pick from all those things on the outside looking in. It just wasn't the right pick for what you wanted to do, which is be a frontline starter.
Yeah, that was not a fun one to watch, kind of unfurl. I just always wondered about the mechanics there and how that played into the conversation. Before we get out of here, let's stay on the draft a little bit. Draft comps are a thing. Fans love them. Okay. It's what is this play? And you can understand it. Like, what is this player going to be? And if you watch the draft or you pay attention to the draft, you see draft coverage, wherever you get your draft coverage, sometimes comps are thrown out there. And I sometimes think, and we don't need to go down this road, comps are used by some folks in the wrong manner. It's this guy looks like this player, so he's that player, instead of it's a role. I remember Jared Kelnick at the height of his prospect status. I was like, look, like if this guy maxes out, like how is he not Matt Holliday? And people were like, but he's right-handed. That's what I got. Everybody's like, oh, you're nuts. He's right-handed. It didn't matter. Like I'm not looking for a guy who looks like him. But I'm wondering if you guys have some interesting comps of draft players you can bring up, something that was, whether it was yours or not, something that you were spot on about, something that it was like, wow, this just did not work. Even if it was someone else's, it doesn't matter. But if it was yours and you kind of brag on it, I know, JB, you have a ton of these. Joe, you've been doing this plenty long, where you can remember saying, hey, when I watch this player, I see this player. We'll start with you, Joe. Is there one where you were just so far off on, or just like, I nailed this and this was amazing, or this was funny? Because I got to tell you, I have a little bit of a funny one. It's not going to be funny for some, but I have a little bit of a funny one. Let's start with you, Joe.
I got two on both sides. I got two that I was especially wrong on, and one of them is a Future Stars guy. So that's actually why I called JB, and that's why I'm here.
Making amends.
Yeah. So the first one, James Wood. So James Wood was drafted in the comp round, I think, by the San Diego Padres in 2021. Got to see him live in 2020, that summer. Interviewed him that winter, and he was extremely soft-spoken. I said, boy, if this guy goes anywhere with a big market, he's just going to get chewed up and spit out. And then his spring 2021 came along, and it was awful. I mean, it was like 31% strikeout rate in high school. I said, I'm out. Like, let's get him to school and see what happens. Now he's, one of the top prospects in baseball. The other one is Robbie Snelling. Saw Robbie. I had a 4th round grade on Robbie Snelling. I thought it was stiff. I thought it was 2 pitches. Didn't like the strike quality. And he was already a linebacker body. And he's just turned himself into a baseball body. And now he's got one of the best breaking ball, fastball, changeup combinations in minor league ball. So dead wrong on that. I do have 2 comps that I'm actually pretty happy with. Back in 2019, I fell in love with Dom Fletcher. I've always been an Arkansas guy for some reason. Fell in love with Dom Fletcher at Arkansas. And he finally made his debut this past year for the Diamondbacks. And I called him Josh Reddick at that time. And it hasn't, it wasn't Josh Reddick until like this year. But it looks like it could be a pretty good call. And then the other one, just because it's such a weird, deep pull, and so many people don't even know who this guy is, at least my age. This past year I called Kyle Teal, and we'll see if it turns out this way. I called Kyle Teal the next Greg Zahn, which I was pretty happy with. So we'll see what happens, but you're right. I mean, comps are just, more often than not, they're more damaging than they are instructive.
They can be, but fans love them, so we just keep giving them.
They do. It just helps you visualize a player that's so many years away.
Yeah. Real quick, back when Dustin Ackley was the number 2 pick in 2009, I heard a good one. Okay. It was an interesting, and it was fair. It was absolutely fair. And I think the funny thing is that unless you were a little older person, this did not come from someone inside an organization. I can't even remember who actually said it first, to be honest with you, but I remember talking to Keith Law about it. And it was like, can you take Dustin Ackley at number 2 in this draft? Like, college performer, doesn't necessarily project to hit for much power. You don't know where he's going to end up on the diamond. Is this really a guy you can take at 2? And the naysayer, on the pessimistic side, it was, okay, this guy might be Dave Magadan who can run a little. And I stopped in my tracks and thought to myself, my first thought was, oh, come on, that's ridiculous. The more I thought about it, I was like, you might be onto something. You might be, this is interesting. You might be onto something. Dave Magadan spent all those years playing first base, hitting like a guy that belonged on the bench, but he would hit for average. He would hit 300 with the really, really light on base. Wouldn't walk a ton, but he'd hit 300 line drives, basically no power. And Dustin Ackley probably got that comp. That comp probably got back to Dustin Ackley long ago, because what did Dustin Ackley do when he got to, well, really starting with his sophomore year at North Carolina? Started to swing for the fences. And they would ask him, hey, are you trying to hit home runs every time? He's like, yes, I'm trying to hit the ball 5,000 feet every single time at the plate. And that obviously didn't work out for him. He didn't have a very long major league career. But that one to me was interesting because it was a, hey, if it doesn't work out, like the high side is this is what you're getting. And in today's day and age, that's not an everyday guy. A guy that ends up at first base or left field that hits 300 with no OBP to back it up and very little power, that doesn't work. And that one stands out to me. It was a very interesting way to look at comps. You were rolling through a range of them for the same player, and someone stopped at Dave Magadan for Dustin Ackley. I always thought that was interesting. JB, I know you got 1,000 of them. Give me a couple that stand out for you.
Positive or negative? Which ones you want?
Give me one negative one where it was a bad comp, whether it was yours or someone else, where it just didn't work and the player completely turned into something different, or a really good, and then follow with a really good one.
Well, the thing about comps is, and I'm just gonna, that's something else I've always been kind of good at. So I don't know that I missed on comps. I'll give you a player that I missed on. I'll just give you that. Let's try that one. Okay. I missed on Paul Goldschmidt like everybody else. Okay. And the reason why I say that is because he went in the 8th round. I took a guy in the 3rd round. I took another guy in the 8th round ahead of Paul Goldschmidt. He went in the 8th round, signed for $95,000. Okay. Everybody missed on him. That's the biggest miss of all time for me, was Paul Goldschmidt. Comp-wise, for whatever reason, because I grew up in big league clubhouses and saw a lot of big league baseball, it's never been tough for me to put that together. Physical comps have been tougher than game comps. For example, Jared Kelenic I thought was Rusty Greer. That's what I thought he was. Okay. Yep. I never thought he was, and I said that to Tram when they took him. I say he's Rusty Greer, and he goes, he's got to be better than that. And I said, I think he's Rusty Greer. It's kind of tracking that way. Okay. It's kind of what he's going to be. So It could be a little better, but it's kind of tracking like that. Now, one of the best comparisons, one of my favorite comparisons that I've made, is a player that is a report that got a lot of run, and that's Tim Anderson. Okay. And I had Sean Dunson on Tim Anderson. And while it's changed a little bit, and he didn't have the 80 arm, man, he had a lot of everything else he could do that was pretty close to what Dunston was going to be. That was a very fun one to have, because Tim Anderson, when he was drafted, was 17 overall. Yeah. We took DJ Peterson, and my favorite comparison that I've ever heard of all time was made by young Tom McNamara on DJ Peterson. He called him Bob Horner. I thought that was great. I was like, this is awesome. We got Bob Horner there. Okay.
You think if Peterson doesn't get hit in the face, he hits?
I think that with DJ, it was a big concern and a change. I was all in on the bat. To be honest with you, it was hard not to like him as a bat. There wasn't a whole lot to do anything with, right? It was all bad or nothing. And so when he got hurt, there wasn't any fallback role. There wasn't anywhere to go with it. We just a thing with Ackley, and I'm not trying to pick on Matt because those guys were good picks at the time. But with Ackley, if whoever said he was Dave Magadan, you don't want that at 2. I don't want Dave Magadan at 2.
And that was the conversation. But do you really want this guy at 2?
Yeah, I'm not doing that at 2. I want, Seager is a pick that was an overachiever, but he went where he's supposed to. You redraft him in the 1st round. No club's taking Kyle Seager in the 1st round. Right. No club, not as an amateur, but they took him where they wanted to, right? So, I think with Tim Anderson, because he was such a far project still, he was nowhere near a finished product, that was a comparison to watch him turn into. That was pretty fun.
Tim Anderson. Yeah, I've read that report. That's a good one too. Yeah, that's a good. That's one of the top 3 or 4, I think. I put Adam Frazier up there. I put Tim Anderson up there. The Kevin Gossman one is really good too, by the way. That one.
Kevin Brown. Who's Kevin Brown? How's that looking? Go look at Kevin Brown.
He's still Kevin Brown.
Yeah.
Speaking of Kevin Brown, why isn't Kevin Brown in the Hall of Fame?
I don't know, but go look at Kevin Brown's track.
Can we go there for 30 seconds? Why isn't Kevin Brown in the Hall of Fame?
Why isn't he still pitching? He pitched until he was like 49.
He is. He's with the Blue Jays. It's Kevin Gausman now. He just changed his name. It's the same dude. Yeah, it's the same guy.
Kevin Brown.
Yeah, that's
Kevin.
Isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy to you guys? I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right that Kevin Brown was the first $100 million player.
He was.
Yeah.
Dodgers gave it to him.
Yeah.
Kevin Malone.
Is that not insane to you? Like, what a trivia question that's going to be. I mean, it's a good trivia question now, but 20 years from now, when we've got, guys making $70 million a year,
he was a monster. Gausman was another kid that wasn't afraid of the ball ever. Right? He was like, "Give it to me." I remember I saw a game with him and Chris Stratton, who's still in the big leagues as a reliever. Right? Pitching in Mississippi. It was at LSU, Mississippi State versus LSU. And those guys went pitch for pitch for 9 innings. Pitch for pitch. I mean, Gausman had a 70 change, the Foch change up. He had that. He had a 98. The curveball was a 3, but the year before he had a slider, which was a 6. You know what I mean? And it's kind of running between now. It's a 45 to a 50 breaking ball, here and there. But he gets guys out with those 2 pitches. The delivery was the same. The angle was the same. The demeanor was the same. The sink was the same. And he went in the same pick. Kevin Brown went 4 overall, and Gausman went 4 overall right behind us. We took Zunino. He went 4. And Gausman went out, and he was one of those guys that was going to develop over time. Kevin Brown took 6-7 years to settle in. Like, if you go look at his track, it took 6-7 years. Gausman took about 6-7 years, right, to settle in. And next thing you know, now the guy's dealing. He gets guys out at will because he found his rhythm and he got those moving body parts going the same way. And he's probably got 5-6 more years ahead of him, right? What's Gausman now? 32? Does that sound about right? 32-ish. So he's going to pitch till he's 38, 39 because he can do all that. So, that was a fun one. Anderson was a fun one. Man, what was it? No, there's a couple other good ones in there. Michael Reed, I drafted him. I put Aaron Rowand on him. Same body. If Michael didn't get hurt, it's the same type of profile. So the comps that are out there, for me, the physical, there's 2 ways to do it. There's the physical, and then there's the role. I tried to match up position and hand just because that's what you're taught to do. But the comps give fans a visual. They're important. Some people try not to do them. It's okay. I'd rather have you say I don't have a comp. Sometimes guys are themselves. I've done that before too. Hey, who does he remind you of? Himself, right? Reminds me of himself because he's going to be his own guy. Noah Naylor was one of those guys. Who does he remind you of? Himself. You know what I mean?
Not his brother, because that's the Harold Reynolds version of a comp.
Yeah. So Josh, here's one for you. Josh, I thought was Mo Vaughn. Okay. Now at the time, go back and look at what Josh looked like when he signed.
Yeah.
Look at him now. Yeah. Okay, he's in a lot of work. I thought he was Mo Vaughn. And then when the Marlins took him at 11, I was like, whoo, boy, And not that he didn't belong there, but that's just what you were getting. And he just hit. And Josh could just – that's what
you would take – you would take Mo Vaughn at 11. Mo Vaun –
Yeah, I'm not arguing
without
that.
looking it up, I bet you Mo Vaun had 20 F-WAR over 12 years.
I saw Josh Naylor in the Dominican Republic hit a ball over the Twins clubhouse and dorm in right field in a game at 16 for the Canadian national team against a Dominican out there throwing 95 an A ball, not knowing where it was a rookie ball, not knowing where it was going. And Josh just hit this thing, And the funny thing was that would have been 13 maybe. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Man, that was a heck of a draft in 13 too.
Yeah, he was a 15 first rounder. So
it was 15. Yeah, because we took Gareth in the second round in 14.
$2 million, baby.
Let's not get into that one, man.
$2 million. $2 million, my friends.
As Jack would say, shoo. Anyway, we took him. We took Gareth and we got to see Josh. Yeah, so that makes sense. Soroka was another one. He was in that. He was there. So, look, the comps are important because they're trying. I thought Soroka was Paul Bird up and on him. You have the reports, Jason. Go back and look. I mean, the point is,
Paul Bird just makes me think of a different guy. I'll say, JB.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Andrew less, not more. I know who you're talking about. So, but no, I mean, I forget what I did with the guy. But the point is, the comps are important because it just paints a picture of what you can get. Sure. They're fun when you get them right. If you miss, as long as you have some dreaming in what you're doing. When I hear a comparison, I want to hear an impact big leaguer. I want to hear a role player. I want to hear a ceiling play. I don't want to hear a comp that says this guy is sterile, right? Rusty Greer is a good player. Kelenick's going to be a good player. Is Kelenick a Hall of Famer? No. He's a good player. Yeah, he's a good player. So, and being in Atlanta may help that, but he's a good player. That's kind of what you're looking at, that type of stuff with comps.
Let me ask you this, JB, before we go. And maybe it's too early and you don't want to throw these comps out there because these kids haven't even been drafted. But when you look at Slade Caldwell and you look at, I think you gave me a comp for Santucci a while back. But when you look at Braden Montgomery, Santucci, and Slade Caldwell, are you in a place right now where you want to put a comp on any of those guys?
Yeah, so Santucci's Mark Mulder. That was my comp.
Right, yeah, you said that last week, I think.
He's going to be very good. Caldwell, for me, I don't know that power is going to be part of his game yet. I don't know that it's not because he's got plenty of strength. I just don't know that the speed game he plays is what is going to fit that. I think Adam Eaton isn't strong enough. He's nowhere near as big as Pasednik, guys like that. So the guy that Caldwell brings to mind is more of a Lenny Dykstra type of guy. And he's going to play center field, and he's going to play well, and move around. He's going to run. He's going to steal base. He's going to slash. And if he hits you 10 a year, it's a great year, right?
Without the drugs and spades and speed and everything.
Correct. But we're talking about player. We're not talking about makeup. Okay, so we're talking about player. Yep. So Caldwell. Montgomery, for me, because he's a switch hitter, is a very difficult comparison because you don't see that a lot. Braden Montgomery is basically Braden Montgomery. If I had to put a player on him, just a player, regardless of the comp things that go with it, he's Dave Winfield. And I know that's a big, lofty comparison, but Braden's 6'4"-ish, almost 6'5". He's gotten a lot broader. He's still going to fill in. There's still some upside to grow. You ever look at Winnie's huge, but he's thin, right? Montgomery has an 80 arm, so do Winfield. Montgomery has 60 to 70 raw that plays, so do Winfield, right? And as he grows into that, Montgomery might have 8 raw. I mean, he's got a couple of 8s in the box. He's never going to be an 80 runner. It's going to be an 80 arm. He's at least a plus defender on a corner. He's got 8 power, and it's probably a 55 bat, real world 55 bat. Braden Montgomery is going to give you 275 and 30. That's what he's going to give you by the time it's all done. He's going to strike out a little bit. He'll strike out in pro ball a little bit, not a ton, but if he strikes out 100 times, gives you 30, and plays a plus defense in right field, and hits 275, hits 4 or 5 in your lineup, you're rolling with that all day.
That's a 5-win player.
I mean, that's 100 strikeouts in today's game is elite.
He's going to make better contact, so he'll strike out 100, 120 times. He's not, you're talking about guys that with strikeouts for me. When I look at extreme strikeouts, I'm looking at Jose Hernandez, Richie Sexson. I'm looking at guys like that. I'm looking at guys just swing and miss constantly, right? The Tommy Troy kid we had that went to Stanford, he's Brett Boone. I've been saying that the whole time. He's Brett Boone, right? And you look at the tools and how that matches out with the makeup, and he's Brett Boone. So, Braden's Braden, but if you got to put a comparison on him, I got Dave Winfield.
Interesting. I saw Braden last spring. When he was still at Stanford, and he was quiet for 2 days, or I thought he was quiet for 2 days, and then he hit a rocket like 112 miles an hour out to right field, and an inning later he threw a guy out of third base from right field. And then I looked at the 2 games that I had seen, and he was actually 2 for 5 with 2 walks, 2 stolen bases, and 2 extra base hits. It's a pretty good player. I barely noticed until he hit the homer. Obviously a toolsy guy. Interesting. Good stuff, guys. Hey, we're going to do this as much as possible. As much as the 3 of us can get together and do this, we're going to do it. We're going to talk about anything and everything under the sun. I won't put you guys on the spot and get a parting shot because we'll never get out of here if that happens. So appreciate it, guys. We'll talk next week. You have been listening to the FSS Plus podcast.
So just chill till the next episode.